Okay guys, here's a new set of notes that we're going to do. So you need to label your page with this title and make sure that you put it in the table of contents. So pause this video long enough to get that done, and I'll be here waiting when you finish. So at this point I'm going to assume that you have everything completed and are ready to continue with your notes. So we're going to start with talking about some of our vocabulary words. So you need to write these down in your notes, even though we already have them in our vocab, because the more times we write them, the more they get into our brain, and they're never, ever, 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 ever going to leave. So they're going to be stuck with you forever. You're never going to forget Miss Buckman. I'm going to be with you for the rest of your life. Evil laugh. Insert here. All right, so we're going to start with something called an allele. And so the alleles are pretty much just different versions of the same gene. So you need to put that in your notebook. Different versions of the same gene. Okay, so an example of this that could be used from the classroom would be the guys in your class. Every boy in the class is a male, so they are an example of the gene male. But none of them, with the exception of our twins, are exactly the same. So each male student is a different allele or a different version of the gene male. Okay, so the next thing we need to talk about is how do we distinguish between these different types of alleles? And one of the main differences that we have come across is the concept of dominant versus recessive. So there are two main differences between dominant and recessive. A dominant is always going to express itself. So if you have the gene for brown eyes is dominant. So if you have the gene for brown eyes in your genetic code, you're going to have brown eyes. It doesn't matter if you have a gene for blue or green or anything else, you've got those brown eyes. A recessive, on the other hand, only shows itself or only expresses itself if it is paired with itself or with a copy of itself. So in order to have blue eyes, I have to have two genes that are blue. If I have a brown and a blue, I'm going to have brown. If I have a blue and a blue, I'm going to have blue. So that's the main difference between dominant and recessive. The other thing that we need to know is that dominant uses a capital letter, and recessive, well, that was a little weird. Way to go, technology. So if dominant uses a capital letter, then recessive is going to use the lowercase. Once again, way to go, technology. And then the letters, this is very important, the letters to represent genes come from the dominant trait. This is very, very important. You gotta write this in your notes, definitely. You know, write this whole thing, but star this thing because it's very, very, very important. And if at any point, guys, you need to pause this to write these down, it's a great thing about this video. You can pause me at any time and then continue going. So, dominant, recessive. Letters to represent the genes come from the dominant trait. Okay, so you're probably sitting there going, what the heck does that mean? Well, this comes into play when we use these called Punnett squares. So we've got the Punnett square. The Punnett square was first created by a man named, oh, what was his name? I gotta think for a minute. Reginald Punnett. He lived in the 1900s, and he first created this, most accounts say, in 1905. And to use a Punnett square, we draw a box, and it looks a lot like a foursquare when you played foursquare in elementary school. So we draw a foursquare box. And what we're going to do is, typically we put the mother's genes on top and the father's genes go here. And we're going to use this to predict the traits of the children or the offspring. So we're going to look at percentages. So we're going to predict the traits of the offspring using the mother's traits, and using the father's genes. Okay, so I take my Punnett square. I'm going to draw another Punnett square. And let's say that I have a green plant. The mother is green plant, and green is dominant. So I'm going to put dom. The father is a yellow plant. Yellow is recessive. Okay, your questions are going to tell you which one is dominant and which one is recessive. Either by telling you like this, or through the actual genetics, the letters, which we're going to demonstrate now. So I know mom is green, and I know that green is dominant because my problem has told me that. So I'm going to figure out what mom's genes would look like. Now, if I was able to flip back to the last slide, which you can do, I can't, but you could do that, it tells me that the letters come from the dominant trait. So since the dominant trait is green, that means that I am going to use the letter G. Now the question is, do I use big G or little g? Capital G or little g? Well, once again, mother is dominant. Dominant is capital. So I'm going to use big G for the capital. Now I happen to know that mama also has a little g. Problem would have to tell you that, but I'm coming here and telling you that mom has a big G and mom has a little g. Green plant tells me that dominant right there tells me that the green is what is actually dominant. So that's mom. So let's look at dad. Dad is recessive. He's yellow. So does that mean that we put Y's? No, we don't. We have to have the same letter. They use the lowercase of the same letter. So they are both going to be little g's. I know that they both must be little g because in order for the yellow to show itself, my recessive has to be paired with an identical gene, an identical allele. So they must both be recessive for the yellow to come out. So my recessive is going to be the lowercase of the dominant letter. Recessive is the lowercase of the dominant letter. Don't forget that. That's also really important. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to extend my page a little bit, so I've still got that information, but I'm going to be able to draw my Punnett square now. So I'm going to draw my Punnett square. Remember, it's a box that looks like a 4 square. And I'm going to try my best to color code this. Now, Mom's goes on top, like we said before. Now, I've got 2 different jeans here. And would you look here, I got 2 spots. So my big G goes right up here. And my little G is going to go right there. Now Dad has little G's. That's all he has. But he has 2 as well. 1 here, and 2 spots. So we're going to look at those 2, and we're going to make those different colors as well. So we got G, and we got G. Alright, so the way that I do this is I'm going to cross them. So where they cross, I'm going to write them again. This is going to be the hardest part of this. The hardest part, I promise you. So this G is going to go here. And we always write the big letter first. And then this little G is going to go right there. And so we have big G, little G. Okay? So I'm going to erase that as best I can. So then once again, this G is going to go down here. I have big G. Now instead of the peach colored G, I've got the red colored little G, but I still have big G, little G. So it's just a down and across, down and across. That's all I'm doing. Down and across, down and across, down and across. So now I've got, I'm done with my big G. So I'm going to do this little G. So I go little G down. And I'm going to do this little G across. And so I end up with little G, little G. Let me fix that G because that's going to bug me. And then this one's going to come down again to the bottom one. And instead of the peach colored one, I'm going to have the red one come over. So I'm going to have big G, little G, little G. And let me fix my G's again because you know that's going to bug me. I know it's bugging some of you. So now I've completed my Punnett square. So what I need to do now is to figure out my percentage. So I have 2 out of 4 that are big G, little g, and that equals 50% big G, little g. Big G stands for green, so those are going to express themselves as green. I also have 2 out of 4 little g, which equals 50%, because 2 divided by 4 is 50%. Little g, that are going to express themselves as yellow. So if these two plants mated, they would form they would have half a chance of being green, and their offspring would have half a chance of being yellow.